Our gospel reading this morning comes from the book of John, chapter 10, verses 1 through 10. I assure you that whoever doesn't enter into the sheep pen through the gate, but climbs over the wall, is a thief and an outlaw. The one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The guard at the gate opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. Whenever he has gathered all of the sheep, he goes before them, and they follow him, because they know his voice. They won't follow a stranger, but will run away because they don't know the stranger's voice. Those who heard Jesus use the strategy didn't understand what he was saying. So Jesus spoke again. I assure you that I am the gate of the sheep. All who come before me were thieves and outlaws, but the sheep didn't listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief enters only to steal, kill, and destroy. I come that they could have life, indeed, so that they could have life to the fullest. The gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, I'm excited to be with you this morning, Camano Lutheran. My name is Ryan Brown. I am Executive Director of Link Northwest and also Mission Developer here at Faith Lutheran Church in Lakewood. And I get the privilege this morning of sharing with you about our work in our community, as well about how I think the gospel is really indicative of what we're doing and kind of shares a lot about how we're functioning as a church and as an agency in the community of Lakewood and Marysville. So I want to begin in our gospel text and just marinate, think a little bit about what it means for Jesus to be the gate. I mean, he's the shepherd and he's the gate. And what does that actually mean? For a long time in the history of Christendom, people have used this text to ensure that people don't perceive themselves as redeemed, to ensure that people feel this sense of othering that has gone on. And in my own life, in my spiritual upbringing, this text was used as a hammer on me. It was used as a tool to try and convince me that I was different from the people of God, and that in order for me to be redeemed, to find my place in heaven, I had to know the one true Jesus and follow that true Jesus. And I'm not saying that Jesus isn't the gate or that Jesus isn't the shepherd, but isn't it interesting that when you look around Christendom today, how many different versions of Jesus are there? How many, and by that I mean, how many different versions of the church exist across our country, across our continent, across the world, right? I mean, how many different versions of Lutheran exist just in our small county? There are 5 of them within 10 miles of this building. And so we all have this perception of who the perfect Jesus is, the perfect theology of our own Christianity. And when you overlay that with this text, you get thousands of different kinds of hammers that are used on people who really just need a Jesus that says, come in, I've made a safe place for you. Come in, I've created a warm bed for you. Come in, there's food for you here. And that's kind of the orientation of the nonprofit work that we're doing with Link Northwest and the work that we're trying to do in our community. And that's not to say that we're doing it perfectly. It's not to say that we're doing a better job of anybody. We're just trying to be good partners and good stewards in the way that we know how to best. And what I love about this John text is it sets a beautiful example of what could be and maybe what should be in our churches. So when you look at John chapter 10, the very beginning of the chapter is about one very specific idea. And so I'm going to read again, and I'll kind of let you in on what I'm reading here. So I assure you that whoever doesn't enter into the sheep pen through the gate, but climbs over the wall, is a thief and an outlaw. The one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The guard at the gate opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. Whenever he has gathered all of his sheep, he goes before them, and they follow him because they know his voice. Because they know his voice. The sheep listen to his voice. He calls them by name, and they know his voice. And what I love about this text, what the example I think that this gospel is setting, is actually an example of listening. And not just listening, being a church that's listening for the voice of God, but also being a church that's listening in our community, that's being an example of what it means to listen to the needs of the sheep. Because the shepherd doesn't just come in and demand the sheep's respect and say, you will go where you're told. The shepherd has to earn the trust of the sheep too. The shepherd has to lay among the sheep, has to prove that he has the best interest of the sheep at heart. There's work to do to be a shepherd. And sheep don't just automatically become trusting of the shepherd. The shepherd has to kind of prove his salt, right? And so the shepherd trusts because they've developed that trust, because that trust has been taught to them, and they've been made known to understand that that's safe, that the shepherd is safe for them. Otherwise, how would they know the difference between the shepherd and the thief, right? And it's not just because the gate gets opened, it's because the shepherd has done the time to get to know the needs of the sheep and is also listening for the needs of the sheep. So a great example of this in this world is if you're looking out at your flock and you see all of these sheep and it looks like they're all thirsty. You don't lead them off to a place where there's no water. You immediately look for a way to get them to water, to get them hydrated. If they look hungry, you're finding a place for them to find food. If they look tired, you're looking for a safe place for them to bed down. If they look scared, you're looking for wolves. You're looking for predators. You're trying to find a way to help them feel safe, because scared sheep do irrational things. And hungry sheep do irrational things. In fact, sheep in general just do irrational things. There's never been a dumber animal, in my opinion, than a sheep, because they just get it in their head that they're going to do something, and then they do it. And a good shepherd isn't just there to help make sure that they're safe. It's actually to keep the best things in front of them. It's to keep the safest things in front of them so that they don't run off in fear. As a church, I believe it's our calling to function that way in our community. Hungry people do irrational things. Hungry people, thirsty people, unhoused individuals, people with behavioral health challenges, people that are just stressed in their homes, people that are overworked. I mean, am I speaking to y'all in any way? I'm speaking to myself. There are challenges that we can meet just by showing up and being a stress reduction place. Sometimes just a meal is enough. Sometimes just a safe place for my kids to play while I take a breath is enough. And the work that we're called to isn't just to be a people who shout the name of Jesus out into the community and say, follow him and you'll get to heaven. It's to set an example and to help find ways to nurture and nourish people. And that's the work that Link Northwest has been about in our community. And we got started in this work in 2018, just as we moved into Lakewood, started really digging into what does it mean to serve Lakewood. And we could make lots of assumptions about what that looks like. And you're probably doing the same up on Camano Island and in Stanwood. What are ways that we can serve our community? What we found and what we believe is true across the church and across the community, across the country, is we could assume what people need, or we could follow the footsteps of Jesus and we could go ask people what they need. We could go listen in the community for the challenges. Where are you struggling? Do you need childcare after school because you're still working for 3 hours? Do you need meal support? Do you need food because we're in a vegetable and fruit desert? Do you need dairy products? Do you need, what is it? Do you need diapers, wipes? Do we need elder care, support for your parents while you're at work? What is it that is necessary in our community? If we assume those needs, we're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of everything building something our community may never use. And it will feel good for us to have done that work, and we'll pat ourselves on the back, look at this great thing that we've done, and then it will sit and it will rot, or it will sit in the corner and it will be outdated, or it will or the carpet will get stained and we'll be mad about it, or we'll find our way into this complacent frustration where we did all this work and now what? But if we listen, if we really listen, and not only listen, but we're willing to pivot and to make changes as the needs change, we're going to serve a lot better. And so for us as an agency, we've been listening. We spent a lot of time in 2018 learning what are the needs of Lakewood? How can we support families in Lakewood? And family resourcing was a big deal. Parent skill building classes, pro-social spaces for students, rental and utilities assistance for families in need in the apartments nearby, pro-social space for adults to engage and to find support services among themselves and in the community. All of that, all those things were things that we heard and that we did our best to respond to. And so we've distributed resources. We've applied for grant funding to be able to support people with rent assistance. We've hired staff to support the direct needs of our community. And most recently, we've been hearing from the city of Marysville and from residents of central Marysville, they need access to our services closer to downtown. So we've contracted with the city to open a second office down in Jennings Park down in central Marysville. And the only reason to do that is because people need us to be closer in order to access the services. Lakewood's a long ways from downtown Marysville. Being able to be in people's neighborhoods gives them the ability to come closer, for us to get closer to them, to be able to respond more quickly. Now, I think the big reason for this, this text is really hitting me, and the reason that this, I think, is important for us as a church, and again, in the nonprofit world, is that people's needs change. We had a family, I'll tell you this story, we had a family last year that came in for rental assistance, and they had a fairly large rent bill that needed to be paid. We were fortunate enough to have the resources to help them, and so we paid 3 months back, and we were able to pay them 3 months forward, pay for their rent 3 months forward, and got them in a position where they weren't reliant in that moment on their paycheck in order to just stay unevicted, to be able to stay in their home, in their apartment. So we got all that set up, and then it went quiet. And we paid for the bill, and we didn't hear from them again. And we reached out, a little bit, just check-ins, how are you doing, anything that you need, and everything was quiet. And recently our team decided we were going to do a real outreach. We were going to reconnect with everybody that we had paid rent assistance to. And so we have a new navigator on our team, resource navigator, and she got in touch with this family and found out that the reason they haven't been in touch is because they're doing so well. Because their needs shifted, and now they're focused on supporting her grandpa with some family stuff that's going on with him. His health has been challenged, and so she's been supporting him. Her boyfriend got a job, and so he's been supporting the family with more resources because he's getting paid now in a way that really serves that. They're receiving some assistance funding from the state because she's helping with grandpa, and the kids are in school. They're not in childcare, so that cost is down. And they didn't reach out because they've been so busy taking care and actually thriving at what they're doing. And what we realized is that family doesn't need us to do the same thing again. They don't need us to write another rent assistance check. Right now they need behavioral health support because it's hard taking care of an elder grandparent. They need support for their kids because when they come home, mom's not there because she's working with grandpa at his house, and dad's stressed because he's coming home from work and has to make dinner and make sure that they get their homework done, and they could use this space for education support. If all we were doing was serving rent assistance still and not perceiving what their needs are, we would be of no use to this family. And the more willing we are to do that work, the more willing we are to live into that calling, the more real it's going to be in the community. And so my question, my constant challenge to churches and for us in our work is, how do we support people where they are? How do we build enough trust that when the time comes and we're reaching out to ask questions, that they're willing to share their life with us, to say, this has been really hard, and I could really use help with this, or to be able to answer those questions without even needing them to answer, without needing them to say a word, right? How do we know people well enough that we can just be with them and understand the challenge, understand the pain that they're living in? And I think that is something that takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of time. Again, it takes a willingness to set down our own stuff, our own issues, our own needs, our own desires, and to perceive someone else's needs. And that is really hard for churches to do. And I'm not trying to say that it's easy in any way, but we've built these amazing systems. these sanctuaries and these spaces and these liturgies and this rhythm where we expect it a certain way. We expect to show up and the music sounds some way. We expect that the carpet's going to look and smell and be, vacuumed a certain way. We expect that our pew is going to be vacant and that nobody else is going to be sitting in it, right? We expect that the lights will be on and the power's on, and that Sunday morning is just going to come on and we just show up and be there. And while that's a beautiful thing and has been going on for a long time, there are people driving by my building right now, and your building right now, and your home right now, that are just exhausted. They're stressed because they can't put shoes on their kids' feet. They can't buy enough groceries to take care of the rest of the week. They're worried about how they're going to pay for the softball thing that their son wants to do or their daughter wants to do. They're just stressed because they're trying to provide a life, and it feels like there's barrier after barrier after barrier. And we as good shepherds have an opportunity to say, this is important, but you're more important. And this is good, but man, what I would give to come and watch your kid play softball and make sure that y'all have a place to have dinner tonight. Or what does it look like for us to reach into our community with what they need instead of just what we want to give them? I think that's a question for all of us to ask, and for us, we've been fortunate to have listening ears in the community and voices that we've built trust with, willing to speak into the challenges of our community. And so Pastor Scott asked me to share some of the things we've been doing, and I'd like to take a minute just to give you some examples. This last year, we created a fund called the Kicks for Kids Fund. We learned that students in our schools, specifically kiddos that are in foster care or are dealing with housing insecurity, they don't have adequate shoes, and there's not adequate funding in the school systems for shoes. And so we built a fund. We put a bunch of money in there, and we've been buying shoes for kids that need access to that. And we partnered with the Seattle Premium Outlets on Tulalip and have been really working with vendors to be able to make sure that we can buy shoes at a decent price and get enough shoes that really stretch the funding out, but also put really good shoes on kids' feet, shoes that are going to last for a while and not just get worn through. We also, again, have rental and utilities assistance funding that we have been distributing. We have access to additional funding coming very soon, and we're working hard to make sure that we're not just a pass-through where people get a check and then they are done, but also to follow up. What other kinds of needs do you have? Do you need a budgeting class? Do you need a class on low-budget cooking or low-budget grocery shopping? How do we help you to access resources that, and not just resources, but rhythms in your own life that help you to stretch your dollar or that help you to be a little bit stress-free? One thing going on in my family right now, I'm sure this has happened to some of you all, is my kids are hearing about everybody else's family that's going to Disneyland, and they're coming home and they're talking about how this kid went to Disneyland or that kid's going to Disneyland. And my wife and I decided we were going to get on and Google, what does it cost these days to go to Disneyland? I'm going to encourage you not to do that because it is so expensive, and I almost had a heart attack when I saw what the cost of tickets to get into Disneyland is right now. And it's not that I don't want to take my kids to Disneyland, but they're feeling this tension and this stress where everybody else, and it's so silly, but everybody else is going to Disneyland. How come we're not going to Disneyland? Or I want to go to Disneyland. And so we in our own home are trying to find ways to offset that. How can we have fun right here in a way that doesn't cost an arm and a leg and doesn't force us to have to pay all this money just to go and play? How can we do that out in Granite Falls and in Darrington and out on the water on the Sound? And how can we do things that are right here and still build quality family memories? That's another something we're trying to do with the Resource Center, is to teach people that they have access to stress-reducing moments right here, right in town. They can drive over to Lake Goodwin and have a cheap picnic, have a tuna can picnic, and just enjoy being on the beach and skip rocks and finding free days to access the state and the county parks. And what are different means and ways that we can serve people well that don't require them to spend lots of money? And I think that's where I'll close, is our hesitancy as a church, our hesitancy even at the beginning of the nonprofit has always been, what does it cost us? How much does it cost to do this? And what I would say is, it doesn't have to cost much. And especially if we work together, it doesn't have to cost much. This last Sunday at Faith, I hosted a breakfast church. We did church out in our fellowship hall around the breakfast table. And I was really anxious going into it because I was trying to keep it a secret. I didn't want everybody to know. And so I went grocery shopping, and we're worshiping in the morning around 50 people for service right now. It's not enormous, but it's a good sized group. And I was like, what is it going to cost me to feed 50 people at breakfast church? So I went grocery shopping. I think I spent $210 and fed the 60 people that showed up for service on Sunday morning. And what I realized after was that if I had, now that the secret's out about breakfast church, inviting everybody to bring their own dish, we would have had more food, and it would have cost everybody maybe $15 or less to bring a dish, right? $5 if you buy a little fruit tray at Safeway or QFC. It doesn't have to cost us a lot of money, especially if we bring what we can into the story. And that to me is a big deal. It's how do we collectively work together to serve our community in a way that they need us, instead of constantly trying to put together ways that we want to serve the community in ways that they don't need us. So I challenge you, Camano, and all of our churches in the Synod, in the cluster, to be perceiving what's going on in your backyard. What are the needs of the people literally 100 yards from your building and then a mile from your building? How do we reach out and serve those people in a way that really meets their needs? And to be honest, and I say this for me, and we'll close with this, I think it can be a lot of fun. We're enjoying ourselves. We have so many different moments that we create here to serve people, and it's not all hard. It's always fun, and it's an amazing opportunity to get to know people, to be able to work together, and to do amazing things. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be with you all, and I'd love to pray us out here. Let's pray. Holy God, we know that you are good and that you're doing amazing things in our community. And we ask that you'll help us to be a people free to be active in that, to be free and open to working alongside you in our community, to serve people with the things that they need where they are, instead of expecting them to come to us for things that maybe they don't need. God, I thank you for active churches. I thank you for active hands and feet. And I pray that you'll give us strength and courage to go and do more in your holy name. It's in that name that we pray now. Amen.